Hello, my name is Elisa Ben-Porad, and on behalf of Deborah Dwork, who is the director of the Center for the Study of the Holocaust, Genocide, and Crimes Against Humanity at the Graduate Center, City University of New York, it is my great pleasure to welcome you today to the first of a new series of virtual events to amplify Besieged Voices from Ukraine. Each month, we will hear from a historian, an artist, and a journalist on the ground under attack. We host these events to address the complexities of lives disrupted and the experience of unfolding war. And we host these events to keep listening, to keep contact. I am honored to thank our Ukrainian colleagues, Yuri, Ostap, and Anton, for their generosity and their determination to speak to us. And I thank you, everyone who has joined. You show your support with your presence. The event is hosted in association with the Center for Jewish Studies at the Graduate Center, CUNY, the School of General Studies and Graduate Education, and the Masters of Arts in Holocaust and Genocide Studies, Stockton University, and the Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel Center for Advanced Holocaust Studies at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. I'm grateful for our shared effort. Let me introduce my friend and colleague, Natalia Lazar, who together with me will be chairing our panel today. Natalia Lazar is program manager of the Initiative on Ukrainian Jewish Shared History and the Holocaust in Ukraine at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. She holds a doctorate in political science from Chernivtsi National University in Ukraine and is receiving a second PhD from the Strassler Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Clark University. Natalia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elisa. Thank you, everyone. It is my great pleasure to introduce my co-moderator today, Elisa Ben-Porad. Elisa is a professor of history and Unger Chair in East European Jewish History and the Holocaust at Queens College and CUNY Graduate Center. She is a two-time winner of the National Jewish Book Award. She is the author of Becoming Soviet Jews, The Bolshevik Experiment in Minsk, published by Indiana University Press in 2013, and Legacy of Blood, Jews, Pogroms, and Ritual Murder in the Lens of the Soviet, published in 2019 by Oxford University Press. Elisa is a co-editor of 2 volumes, Women and Genocide, Survivors, Victims, and Perpetrators, and the second volume, Pogroms, A Documentary History. She is currently completing the first volume of the Comprehensive History of Soviet Jews, entitled Revolution, Civil War, and New Ways of Life, which will be published with New York University Press. She is at work on a biography of Esther Fromkin and on the first comprehensive study of the DP camps in Italy. She is also an editor of Jewish Social Studies. It is my great pleasure also to introduce our today's speaker. And the first speaker is joining us from Ukraine is Dr. Yuri Radchenko. Yuri is the director of the Center for Interethnic Relation Research in Eastern Europe, an associate professor at the Institute of Oriental Studies and International Relations at Kharkiv Collegium. Yuri is a Holocaust historian, a known expert on local collaboration during the Holocaust in Ukraine. He's also studying the history of right-wing radical movements in Europe during the interwar and wartime periods. Yuri received his PhD at the Karazin Kharkiv National University in 2012. His dissertation analyzed the Nazi genocide of Ukrainian Jews in the military administered area. Currently, he's working on 2 research projects. The first one is a biography of Andrei Melnik, the Ulm leader's life, and it's also a history of the Melnikites movement. And the second project is focusing on Jewish Karaite-Muslim relations in Ukraine during the World War II. He is a recipient of numerous prestigious fellowships in the Holocaust studies, including Saul Kahan Claims Conference Fellowship for Advanced Shoah Studies, Research Fellowship at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and Yehadin Unum, among others. Yuri has recently finished his monograph, Hills Politsayev, Self-Government and the Holocaust in Ukrainian, Russian, and Belarusian Borderland. So keep an eye on the new book coming out soon. Our second speaker is Ostap Slavinsky, joining us from Lviv. Ostap Slavinsky is a known Ukrainian poet, translator, essayist, and literary critic. He is also vice president of PAN Ukraine. He authored 5 books of poetry. His poetry collections were published in Germany, Poland, Czech Republic, Bulgaria, Macedonia, and Russia. He translates fiction and nonfiction from Polish, English, Bulgarian, Macedonian, Belarusian, Russian into Ukrainian. Among the authors that he has translated are Derek Walcott, James Tate, William Williams, Charles Simic, Czeslaw Milosz, Hanna Kral, Andrzej Stasiuk, Olha Tokarczyk, Mikolai Lozinski, Ignacy Karpowicz, Georgi Gospodinov. Slavinsky poetry and translations have earned him Lviv City of Literature UNESCO Prize in 2020, Hubert Burda Poetry Prize in 2009, Kovalev Fund Prize, Polish Embassy's Translation Prize, and the Medal for Merit to Polish Culture in 2014. Ostap Slavinsky was the first program director of the International Literary Festival in Lviv and still organizes many literary festivals and events in Ukraine. In 2015, he collaborated with composer Bohdan Sehin on media performance called Preparation, dedicated to the civilian victims of war in the east of Ukraine. Slavinsky teaches Polish literature at Ivan Franko National University in Lviv, as well as contemporary literatures of East Central Europe and courses in translation at Ukrainian Catholic University. And hopefully, our third speaker will be joining us shortly. Anton Skiba is currently on the assignment in one of the eastern cities in Ukraine. He is a Ukrainian photojournalist, an independent media producer, and he started his career in Donetsk in 2014 when Russia started the war with Ukraine. He worked as freelance media producer and photographer for various media from Argentina to Japan, including major media and non-governmental organizations. Anton is a trainer in program for field security specifically designed for Ukrainian journalists by the Institute of Mass Information. Since February 2022, Anton covers Russian invasion for the Globe and Mail, a known Canadian national newspaper, as a photographer and contributor. I would like to remind our audience that you can ask your questions through the chat, through Q&A box below. So please don't wait until the end of the program. When you have the question, please post it there. Thank you so much. Elisa?
Thank you, Natalia. And thank you again to Yuri, Ostap, and hopefully Anton, who will be joining us, for really giving your time and energy today to share your knowledge and your thoughts about what has been going on since February 24th, since Russia's attack on Ukraine, which, as we all know, is causing the death and injury of thousands, has displaced millions in the worst refugee crisis since World War II, and is bringing about, in some cases, the complete physical destruction of towns and cities. And just this morning, I heard the words of a young man, a teenager, who recently managed to flee the small town of Popasna in Donbass. And he said something that really struck me. He said, "It is impossible to survive war." And what he meant by that was that it is almost impossible to survive the trauma, the fear, and the anger. And that really struck me. So perhaps in light of these comments, I would like to ask each one of you if you could share with us your experience of the war. What has happened to you, to your family, to your community, to your city since the beginning of the war? Maybe Yuri, you can go first, and then Ostap, and hopefully Anton. Yuri.
Hello, good evening, good anytime where you are located now. First of all, thank you for this invitation, this option to speak up today on this such topics. I don't know, it will be interesting for somebody to know, because really siege people, it's people who are now defend Ukraine somewhere in Azovstal. It's really siege people. I know it's who we are. I'm sorry, we are nobody. But regarding our experience of the war, what I had, I must to say that I met war like millions of people in Ukraine. I woke up at approximately at 5:20 of the morning because I have heard explosions. And for me, first of all, I didn't understand what is going on. Is it really explosions or it's like blowing of the wind to windows of my house? And 15 minutes later, I understood that when my neighbors began to escape from house, I understood that something has happened, and I opened my computer, internet, and understood that really what began. And for me, I would say I understood that something really happened maybe 24 hours later, when I was walking on my district. It's Pivnichna Saltivka. By the way, yesterday I got photos of my house from Pivnichna Saltivka. God sei Dank, it's still alive. My house is still alive. It was a little bit, distracted, but I hope it will be in the same situation later. And I was walking around, and I felt that people who were staying in long lines to the shops, to supermarkets, and to buy maybe some goods and so on, I understood that people are very nervous. It was impossible to buy clean water, to buy maybe ordinary stuff you can buy any time, and understood that something is going on, not really good. And I was staying in my district, Pivnichna Saltivka, I think for 5 days, something like this, and after this, I had to move to our community, conservative community location, a place which called in Kharkiv Novые Doma, new houses, Нові доми, нові будинки, up for you if you can call it anyway. And after this, I tried to help people from my community and people who are Jewish or even not Jewish, to maybe with some food supplies and so on. But I understood in this situation that, if you do not have a car, you don't have a benzene, gasoline, in this situation, you are helpless. And a few days I tried to support by food, by maybe some stuff, people who lived not far from our community in Lyceum Shalavim. And after this, I had to travel. I traveled to Dnipro. I was staying there, I think, 5 days. It was interesting experience as well. I didn't have time to tell it, maybe later. After this, I evacuated to Lviv, where I had experience to stay a couple of days. And after I moved to Chernivtsi, where I'm staying now. Here is located, I would call it some sort of a refugee camp for people, for Jewish people and people organized by conservative movement in Ukraine. And we have experience. We try to support, first of all, Ukrainian army. Anyways, how can we do it? We try to support people who are elder, who are weak now, who need help, and also I'm trying also to do some research in this time as well. So for me, I would say war began. It's also interesting experience when I have heard, first soldier in my district, and I come and I speak on my mobile phone and I see this soldier, and I see that his uniform is Ukrainian. I say, Alhamdulillah, Baruch Hashem, it's Ukrainian soldier, and continue to talk on my cell phone. So from this, it's quite interesting experience for people who live in urbanistic places and so-called спальные районы, sleeping districts in Kharkiv. I think it will be quite interesting story of collective story of people who had to live there, who moved there, and who had to escape, unfortunately, from these places as well.
Thank you so much. What, Yuri?
Yeah, I think it's it. If you have any questions, additionally, we can discuss and tell. I can talk about my experience at Dnipro and this, I would say, contrast when in Kharkiv situation with nothing, everything is locked, is closed, like apothects, like shops, like supermarkets and so on. And you move to city where people sitting in cafe and drinking and can come into the supermarket to buy some food, and it looks like very contrast, let's say. Yes.
The contrast between, I guess, normalcy, what we could call normalcy of everyday life on the one hand, and on the other hand, everyday life being disrupted from the war.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Remember, yes.
Yeah. Maybe we'll come back to this question, Yuri. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Ostap?
Yes, good evening, good afternoon. I'm very pleased and very honored to be a part of this event. Thank you for invitation. Thank you for your support, for your good thoughts. It's very important for us. For more than 2 months already, since February 24th. Which is commonly considered as the beginning of the war. This is partly true, but partly is not correct, because Ukrainian-Russian war began in 2014. And for me personally, my first experience of being a part of a new situation, completely profoundly new existential situation, a situation of war, began in 2014 when I received call papers to the army, and I was on my way to the military enlistment office, and I understood that something is changing for me very profoundly, very basically. And to be sincere, I was saying goodbye to everything what I was seeing at that time. The situation of war is the situation when one should be ready for everything, to lose everything, to change the way of his or her life, to be on the move all the time. My situation, I don't want to compare my experience with the experience of the people from really hot spots, from the territories with very severe military actions, from the territories of very severe destruction, like Kharkiv, mentioned by Yuri, his native city. My city, the city of Lviv, is kind of peaceful. Of course, relatively peaceful. It's not totally peaceful because there are no safe places in Ukraine now. Each city, each town, or each place on Ukraine's map is under threat now, and it can be shelled. It can be a target for Russian troops at every moment. In fact, we never know. But relatively, Lviv is a safe place, which has gathered a lot of people on their way to the people who wish to proceed to the west, or to choose any other safe places in the Western Ukraine. And that's why living in Lviv now is very important, also in a cultural sense. One has a chance to meet very many people with different experience. The people who feel the necessity to tell their stories very often. I used to be a volunteer at the train station in Lviv during the first 2 or 3 weeks of the full-scale war. And between very simple actions like preparing tea or making sandwiches or helping people to find some shelter, etc., I was listening to the stories. From the one hand, they are similar, but from the other hand, there are many absolutely incomparable fragments in these stories, because each one comes from the different life situations. Very different people found themselves in one boat in the same situation, and there was a moment when I realized that war is it's an exceptional situation also because of establishing of this equality of people. All the people, no matter which profession or field or material situation they come from, they face the same situation, the same level of danger. And this is also a completely new experience, this collapse of hierarchies, previous peaceful hierarchy of in society. And maybe this this new knowledge also is helping us to solidarize, to be a part of a new system, maybe not a system, a new organism, social body, which is this volunteering community, a community of volunteers. I think it's something maybe not exceptional, but I'm not sure whether we could find this phenomenon elsewhere in the world now in these days, when the huge part, maybe a majority of society are volunteers. I think I'm not sure in terms. I can't state it in any numbers, but I think that maybe more than 80% of Ukrainian population are now volunteers and trying to be useful, trying to help armed forces, territorial defense forces in some way, transporting some necessary things for armed forces and for refugees, helping in some other ways. And I think it's absolutely exceptional. It's a kind of parallel system which is simultaneous and parallel to the official bodies, the official political, economical bodies in the state, and Ukrainian state. But the confidence to the Ukrainian state in the Ukrainian society, the level of this confidence is also incomparable. We have never experienced so high extent of confidence towards president, government, ministries, etc. It's absolutely not typical for Ukrainians. As most of post-Soviet or post-socialist societies, we traditionally used to have a very low level of confidence towards the society. So it's something absolutely exceptional, and I'm happy that I want to stress once again that there are no advantages of war. We don't have to have this illusion. There are no advantages of war. War doesn't have its bright sides, but in the same time, I'm happy that we are facing this new phase of ourselves as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ostap, for these, very powerful remarks. I mean, what you said about, the situation of war is when one should be ready to lose everything. As a historian, I study about this, I've read about this, but it's quite different to hear it, from someone who is experiencing it now. And also the sense of community, a community of volunteers, the sense of new society, that's very powerful. Thank you. I see that, Anton, we're very grateful that you were able to join us. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your experience of the war, what has happened to you, your family, your community, or your city since the beginning of the war, as Yuri and Ostap have.
Hello, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry for being late. I just got to the city of Kharkiv, which is still like the front line is not silent here, and sounds of the shellings heard all the time. And my previous interview, which I just finished, was interrupted by air raid siren, and we just moved to more safety places. I would like to start that some people think this war has started 24th February of 2022, but it's not, because it started much earlier. It started in April of 2014, even earlier, in late February, when President Vladimir Putin ordered troops to land in Crimea and annex the peninsula. And after that, like, it's continued, it's escalated in Donbass. After that, it was a campaign of 2014 with the heavy fights, and then there was attempts of international society and attempts of Ukraine to find a peaceful resolution to that. And it was a couple of those attempts, but as we see, they didn't work at all, because Russia never had intention to find a peaceful solution for this war. So this war continues for 8 years in Ukraine. And for me, as a person who was born in the native town of former President Viktor Yanukovych, for me, it was like probably the most bright time of my life, because at that moment of life, I was 24, and now I am 33, and the war is going on. So actually, and I would like to tell that for these 8 years, all the country, not me personally, but all the country, all the society suffered and gone through painful but very important and essential transformation for building up true democracy society, the society which not being ruled by some leader, the society which being self-organized, self-regulated, the networks build it up among activists, among usual people that we've seen since Maidan, and now through 8 years, this is that differs us from the country we've been like 8 years ago, literally 10 years ago. And moreover, and which is more important, around the values. And those values are quite universal, because people are not, in Ukraine became very inclusive towards, in terms, nobody cares about your nationality, nobody cares who you are, where you're from, even what languages are you speaking, because it's the card which Russian propaganda often plays in its messages. But here I see all the time in Kharkiv, people even now not really talk Ukrainian, but if you look in these eyes, you will see much more Ukrainian spirits than anywhere in this country, because people here standing on the front line and fighting for its land any second. People volunteering and supporting those who are fighting. Another group of people, volunteers, are working long shifts and hours under fire, trying to evacuate people, try to distribute humanitarian aid. And this became possible only due to the trust between people, and this trust is around common goal to live in an independent country. That's a very broad perspective. If I may touch my personal experience, since 2014, I switched into international journalism and started to work with Western media, mostly to help them first as a translator to understand the country. But then within a time, I realized for myself, it's more important for me to understand the country what I am living in, and to eyewitness what I'm seeing, and more important later to take a camera in my hands and try to document this reality, not just to help Western world to understand this, but to reflect it and to explain what is happening here. And I see that Ukraine suffers a lot, Ukraine sacrifices a lot, but Ukrainians know what do they do. Even if we touch freedom of press, which unfortunately impossible in the wartime, because we are fighting against probably not the most, okay, Russians already proved that they are not the second strongest army, but in terms of sowing disinformation and sowing propaganda, they are still probably the most powerful and the most disgusting machine designed by humans, in modern history. And Ukraine, unfortunately, is not so capable, and our own only weapon is truth, and we can only deliver news and unbiased information about what is going on from the front line, to give a world a chance to see and listen what's happening here. So, and even now, because of the war, the freedom of speech is much limited in this country, but still hundreds of journalists, brave people who forced to be brave on this war because they didn't have another choice. They committed to their profession and they talk to the world about what is happening in Ukraine. So that's how this war taught me. So I would be happy to reply a little bit later on some questions.
Thank you so much, Anton. Thank you. And again, what emerges here is really the impact of the war on the sense of geography of Ukraine, the identity of Ukraine, and also you mentioned, the Society of Volunteers, echoing some of the comments that Ostap made. The next question that I would like to ask all three of you has to do really more with your profession, right? With Yuri as a historian, Ostap as a creative writer, a poet, and you, Anton, as a journalist. And I'm thinking that it would be very good for us to understand the experience of this unfolding war from the perspective of your profession. So what can you tell us about how the war has changed your work? What is the impact of the war on your work? It can be long-term, it could be short-term. And maybe this time we can start with Ostap, then Anton, and then Yuri.
Yes, thank you. It's a very complex question. I think that there is no one in Ukraine who doesn't feel deep influence of war, of new regime of existence on his or her life. In this sense, our lives are really divided on pre-war and war times, and of course, it's also a false illusion that everyone should be on the front line. Everyone should be engaged somehow directly in the military actions. the country doesn't need 40 millions of war heroes, but the country needs its all systems to work properly. We don't have to stop. We cannot afford to stop a normal life in the country during the war. Quite the opposite. We have to maintain the systems, all the systems of normal life during this military aggression. But the functioning of these systems has to be redefined. Has to be somehow reconstructed in the war times. That's why almost each of us has a new tasks, has a new goals. And for example, the task of every person who works with the words and information is to cope with this proxy war, because Russian-Ukrainian war, Russian aggression against Ukraine is not the ordinary military threat, not the ordinary military conflict. It does not mean only the physical conflict with use of physical weapons, but it's a proxy war, it's a hybrid war. It means that it means a combination of traditional military actions and informational aggressions, such as fakes, hacking, massive propaganda campaigns. And the problem is that this propaganda, massive propaganda campaign carried out by Russia since not since February 24th, not even since 2014, but during the last decades after collapse of Soviet Union, I think. The new post-Soviet Russia, which tends to restore its imperial power and still has these imperial ambitions, but now they are a very weird combination of Soviet heritage, Soviet symbolism, and the heritage of Russian Empire, with all these traditional imperial messages. So we are dealing now with a kind of double imperialism, this combination of two kinds of different imperial formulas, and it's very powerful, and it has enough power, and it's aggressive enough to create a completely distorted image of the world, image of reality. First of all, for its own citizens, but if someone tried to look at the world from this artificial perspective, the perspective of false image of the world, it can be quite convincing, under the condition that you do not get any information from any other sources, under the condition that your image of the world is limited with those informational borders of Russian propaganda. If you are inside it, your image of the world it's okay, it works, it is possible to believe in it. it's wonderfully stated in the book by Peter Pomerantsev, who is one of the best experts in Russian propaganda and how it works. It has a very very good title. Nothing is true and everything is possible. So it's enough for someone who exists within this artificial distorted image of the world to get a short glimpse of something different, and it evokes a conflict, a psychological conflict, and the person can begin to hesitate whether everything is okay. That's why the condition number one for Russian propaganda is to keep this world very hermetic, not to let any outer messages get into this inside this bubble, informational bubble, and it's very dangerous because we have to do with the people who are not ready to hear your messages. We don't. It's very difficult to find any common language with them, and this is what we have to do now. The people of words, the people who work with information, with media, who create texts and messages, is to cope with this propaganda, not trying to oppose any kind of counter propaganda, but to create something what is called counter speech, as opposed to hate speech. The counter propaganda is also propaganda. It's like a mirror reflection of what we hear from the Russian side, but we have to create something completely different based on truth. The value of truth, the value of facts now is absolutely exceptional as never before. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ostap. You know, the first victim of war, especially of this war, is truth, right? So how do we recreate? How do we, you know, show with words and images the truth? Okay, Anton.
I would like to add that the second victim of this war are journalists who are delivering this truth, because unfortunately, journalists became a target in this war. They were deliberately shot, they were getting under fire, and they were dying for spending their lives for delivering the truth. And actually, it's not even about the truth or not truth or hate speech and counter speech. With the journalism, it's much more simple. Journalists report facts and they report news, and as more unbiased you are, as more professional you are. So there's like journalism is way easier than like writing, and that's why our job is just to get to the spot, to document what we see, and to send it through to us, to send it to the audience. That audience can get their own conclusions about what it's seen. And well, I'm lucky that I'm a photographer, so I don't need to write. And for me, it's the most challenging and complicated task. It's to use a visual language to find the best visual solution to show to people the tragedy of people on the ground. That's but if we are talking about challenges that journalists targeting at all, situation in Ukraine is very dangerous and very threatening. For first, like if we are talking about covering this war, it's not a lot of people and journalists experienced covering two conventional armies fighting each other in the heart of Europe, and that causes a lot of extra risks and challenges for them. And some of them are professional risks, some of them are physical risks in terms of how to be protected. And I'm working in a part of a group of journalists to support journalists, and we're training them, we're trying to get a personal protection equipment, and it's also suddenly become a part of our work which we never choose, because at some point of time we realized that if we will not find a solution how to protect people in the field, how to not get them like vest, helmets, first aid kits, if we will not train them how to use these things and how to react to the battles, the chances to survive for journalists are very low. And now, if I am turning my thinking back for 8 years, and I don't understand, like I do understand that it's our reaction to the war, but for me it still sounds like a nonsense that like we need think about these things, but not to think about how to write a better story or how to find a better story or how to improve our like visual storytelling skills. We are thinking about surviving, and we are thinking about how to get alive from the field and to file the pictures. And that's one perspective. Another perspective which we are also challenging is ethical dilemmas all the time. And because every conflict and the war, this war especially, is a huge, massive conflict with a lot of pretext, and as a lot of context leads us to solving those dilemmas. How to not traumatize people we are talking, how to report on that accurately, how to report on combat actions without harming our soldiers who are protecting us. And those dilemmas we are discussing a lot in different professional discussions. And unfortunately for now, it's just a process, and we are in between of this process because there is no finalized solution. That means we have a lot of emerging problems right now with this war for journalist community, and we are still looking for the way in professional community how to find the solution for this. And the third big sphere of our thinking and of our work, to find the way how to explain to the world that the war is happening now, should be stopped now. Because this campaign of February, which started on February 24th, 2022, is a result of ignorance that Western world has demonstrated in 2014 without attempt, with law attempts to stop Russia. This is the result of that the criminal was not punished. And now we are looking for the ways and collecting all the evidence, step by step, picture by picture, evidence by evidence, sound line by sound line, to collect everything and to put it into some, I don't know, not even a legal frame, but in some like codified story, to document everything we can document, to see everything we can see, and to collect this as the evidence against evil. And that's probably the biggest and the most difficult mission in nowadays condition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anton, especially for what you do, in using words and images to counter this false narrative that Russia is feeding, is trying to feed the world. And also, I just wanted to say congratulations to you as one of the journalists of Ukraine, since the Pulitzer Prize was awarded, collectively to all the journalists of Ukraine. So congratulations. Okay, Yuri.
Okay, thank you so much. I will continue this line. Do not respond to the question and try to speak maybe about another stuff. For me, this war, to be honestly, began not on February, even not in March, on April 2014. It began, I'm sorry, 11th December 1994, when Russian forces crossed the Russian-Chechenian border, and they began to destroy Chechnya, to destroy Grozny, and so on. And we do not see anything new now. I'm sorry. And West also responsible for this stuff. First of all, I think so, because they had you had a blind eye to what has happened in Chechnya, what has happened, I'm sorry, in Aleppo, in Syria, and so on. And this situation, it's nothing new. And now people are surprised. You can imagine they destroyed cities in Central Europe. When they did the same on Caucasus, for instance, or in Syria, it was a surprise for us. Sorry, nothing new for this. For me, I know it was a surprise that war will be such scale, such way. And for me, I know a couple weeks, I think 6 days before the war, 7, I was asked by one media in Israel, and they asked me, what about the scale of this war? I told them, it won't be occupation of Kharkiv and Kyiv, and so on, but war will happen in this territory. For me, it wasn't surprised, I would say. But I would say, couldn't imagine that it would be so barbaric in Eastern Europe, because for Russians, when they kill, let's say, Chechenians or Syrians, for them it's not people. I know it. They are subhumans for them. But when they speak about Ukrainians and so on, and a couple days ago, I also was talking with one American Islam researcher, and he told me, Americans help Ukraine because it's white and Christian. For me, it was also interesting. Such stereotype also exists, not only in Republican circles, I'm sure in Democrats as well. And for me, it's also experience when all people, all religious, people of all religions, let's say in Ukraine, they are united to defend our country and to do it. And regarding to speaking about how this war influenced to me and to people who I meet, I think it's very important to mention. Before the war, I was taking also rabbinical courses and Mahon Schechter on Zoom. And before the war, next week, I had to pass exam on Shulchan Aruch. And each Friday we meet on our community, each Yom Tov and so on. It was traditional, I would say. And this first Friday we didn't do it. And also I helped to evacuate people, I mentioned about before, from Kharkiv to Kyiv, to Lviv, to Vinnytsia, and to other places. And I think this war, from perspective of moving population, it also every war it shows such experience and so on. But this war, as another word, it also shows such experience when it destructs different communities and Jewish communities as well in Ukraine. And I think picture after the war looks like another way, I think. And so the Jewish life and Muslim life in Ukraine, because many Muslim communities also were destroyed. A lot of, I think, maybe Protestant community also were destroyed, and so on and so on. So it's quite interesting. I'm sorry, I speak about a little bit like with cold heart, but it's also from perspective of sociology and history. It's very, very important and interesting. Another aspect, I think, though this war, its attempt to destroy as small as possible infrastructure in Ukraine. What Putin wants to do, it's understandable, I think, for any perspective, that he wants to destroy economical infrastructure in Ukraine as small as possible, to create here Syria or Chechnya, and 2-3 years after the war, to come and to capture, to occupy our country. It's visible now and so on. And I think this war, it's option to implement real reforms in Ukraine. When we kick up this not very good people from our lands. I'm sure it will be. And I don't know why, when and how, but I think it will be in following months. We have to fight corruption in our country. I think it's the most important stuff what we should to do, and it's the first of all. Regarding how it's influenced to people who are doing academia in Ukraine, I think it should be mentioned because it's a target of the main idea of this meeting. I just can give you one example. A few weeks before beginning of this stage of the war, we had two plans with our colleagues from different places in Ukraine to publish new issue of Ukraina Moderna dedicated to the Holocaust in Ukraine. And we stored articles and sent it for peer review and got some response. I got mine and I began to rewrite and war began. And I called to guy who is doing this job now. I asked him, so what to do now? And we are going to publish or what, or we stop to do it and we will continue after the war. And he said, I will call to everybody who submitted articles and ask them. And a few days after, he told me that some people are now volunteers, some people in army, some people escaped from Ukraine and so on. But he said me, we will continue anyway to do it. And this shows how people give some response to this war and how they actually, what do they do now? Because, in this situation, first of all, it's the problem with access in some regions, some places, sometimes to archives. You cannot come to archive and to order documents and use them. It's more, it should be mentioned that a lot of archives now are in the danger, especially in eastern regions of Ukraine and southern eastern regions of Ukraine. Nobody knows what's going on with what will be with archives from southern regions, for instance, in Kherson, where territory is occupied. By the way, nobody knows what has happened with archive, SBU archive in Chernihiv. I called a couple of days ago to the director of SBU archive. I talked to him and I said, is it really destructed or not? He said, I don't know. You can imagine 4 weeks after recapture of the city, he doesn't know it. Mashallah. I was shocked, to be honestly. It's interesting process. I think what is going on, and sometimes it looks very, I'm sorry, stupid when situation, for instance, here in Chernivtsi, when a few weeks ago I visited local library because I continued to write a couple articles, what I began before the war and had plans to do it now, and I'm doing this, and they tell, and what I have seen is this library when all staff is sitting there, but they do not give access for researchers who are coming to consult these books and literature and so on. And it was happened a few weeks ago, and I told them, what can I come and to hear books? They said, no, you cannot do it. You must get permission of the rector of our university. Okay. And today I came to the same place and asked them, you can come and can get access. So it depends what person you meet and how you talk to them and so on, and what documents you will show and how you look like and how you speak and so on. So it's also a very interesting experience how researchers can find sources and any literature to continue to do their research even this time. I think.
Thank you, Yuri. You just brought a smile on my face because you reminded of my own experience of working at the same library years ago. So thank you so much. So certain things are remain the same, war or
yes, nothing changed. No, yes. Welcome to Ukraine. Marhaba. Yes.
But I would like to thank you all our speakers for actually pointing very important thing about this war, that it affects everyone, first of all, in Ukraine, in every region. It also affects Ukrainian cities who are abroad. I will just add from my personal experience. But the war caused a major transformation of Ukrainian society, as Anton was pointing out, and it brought to mobilizations of people in different professions, in different walks of life, etc., etc. I would like to turn now to the questions from the audiences. And the first two questions are actually about the impact of war on lives and how volunteers coping with the pressure. And those are questions addressed to Ostap. Ostap?
Well, I think that the war really demands. The war means a huge new demands to each of us. We have to practice the absolutely new skills. And for example, me as a translator, I don't speak about different military practices. I had to recall. I had to recall how to shoot, and I had a military training in early March, preparing for maybe possible joining the army. And I'm expecting maybe the call-up papers, and every day it can happen. In fact, every day I can be called up to the army, and I have to prepare to it. I'm in the army reserve, so it's possible. The second, even as a translator and a writer, I have to also to practice the new skills to broaden my knowledge. For example, during more than 1 month, I was translating not the literature or any scholarly texts, but the lists of necessary things, different military equipment, medicines, etc., everything what was necessary for the armed forces. I was translating it into Polish, English, and other languages, and it was sent along with our volunteers to different organizations abroad, which were supporting Ukrainian defense forces. And of course, if it's possible, and if we have still enough time, I'd like to maybe to show to ask our kind hosts to show a fragment of the video created by PEN Ukraine, Ukrainian PEN Center. It's it's about 6 minutes long, but I'll ask to show maybe the beginning of this video, about 2 minutes, 2.5, and it's a series of short interviews with my colleagues, writers, journalists, about the impact of war on their lives. Some of them have joined armed forces, some of them fight on the informational front line, and I think it's better to hear them personally. So I'll ask our kind hosts to show us this video.
Мене звати Артем Чех, я український письменник, зараз військовослужбовець.
Я Вікторія Меліна, письменниця і також засновниця Нью-Йоркського літературного фестивалю на Донеччині.
Я Остап Slavinsky, перекладач, письменник, викладач.
Богдана Романцова, літературознавиця, літературна критикиня і лекторка.
Це Артем Чапай, донедавна я був українським письменником, тепер рядовий Збройних сил України.
Мене звати Ірина Карпа, я письменниця, сценаристка, колумністка і музикантка.
Лариса Денисенко, правозахисниця, письменниця, киянка. Я народилася в цьому місті, і війна, власне, застала мене в Києві, де я залишаюся дотепер.
До повномасштабного вторгнення Росії у мою країну я жила в Парижі і продовжую жити тут.
Я з Києва, і я в Києві. І нікуди не збираюся звідси їхати.
Стежу за своєю своїми старенькими батьками, вони, між іншим, діти Другої світової війни, і це їхній другий досвід переживання, зокрема в тата, війни в Києві окупованому. Спочатку окупованому німецькими нацистами, зараз російськими нацистами.
Я народилася у Львові і зараз теж знаходжуся у своєму рідному Львові. В моєму домі живуть 9 людей і 3 котів. Коти теж київські.
У Львів ми їхали 2 доби і зараз мешкаємо із друзями у квартирі нашої хорошої подруги. На цьому стільці, або, можливо, на цьому, сиділи Левко Лук'яненко і В'ячеслав Чорновіл.
Львів – це місце, яке поки що мало зачеплене війною, але тут вже є понад 200 тисяч вимушених переселенців, і тому Львів став таким собі полігоном для праці серця.
Я жив у Києві, ми прокинулись від бомб, вивезли дітей. Пішов до військкомату, мене взяли, і я можу сказати, що за 3 тижні моя психіка дуже сильно змінилася, і зараз я вважаю, що нам треба не зупинятись, треба витіснити до кінця.
Все, що ми можемо зараз робити, це знищувати ворога. Байдуже як, байдуже якими засобами. Головне його знищити і вигнати з нашої землі.
В мене було таке відчуття, коли я говорила з мамою, і вона питала: ти не шкодуєш, що ти юристка, міжнародниця і ти письменниця? От зараз, ці часи. І я усвідомила, що я шкодую, тому що мені психологічно було би легше бути або лікаркою, хірургінею, або, власне, бути людиною зі зброєю.
Є така
Thank you. It shows our new roles, but also a new solidarity. Now there are many things we don't have to discuss among ourselves. We understand perfectly well the situation we are in, and this new solidarity I was talking about, it also concerns the community of creative people, writers, journalists, and we all have one goal, one aim, and we have created a new organism of support, of mutual support.
Thank you, Ostap. Thank you. It was very compelling video, and we will add it to the description later, to the recording of this discussion. Now I would like to turn, we have a little bit time left and more questions and messages of support from our audience, and I would like to give the floor to Anton and Yuri. So the previous question was about how people are dealing, and I know a little bit about personal experience of Anton in this war. So he's always being, because of his nature of his work, very close to the front line. The natural question for me is, how are you dealing with the pressure of witnessing the war, and how can you, even if you can you separate it?
Like, for first, it's impossible, and it's a myth that no one is affected, because everyone is affected. And even like the second campaign, as we call it, like of February, which started this year, like I tried to use all the experience I've collected during the first one, and like I've trained a lot, and I've gathered a lot of knowledge, and I've shared knowledge with other journalists. So I was thinking that I am prepared to things which I will see, and in some perspectives, really, and especially in social relations, this war doesn't really differs from the things which I've seen in Donbass. It's just the scale has changed dramatically. But even now, it's very hard to cope in terms of still the voice finding you. And it's impossible to be absolutely ignorant to this war when you're in the field, when you contact with the human tragedy. And the only things which keeps me in operable condition is to think that if I will fall down, no one will tell the story I'm doing right now. So that's why I'm trying to keep my balance between not to be a part of this tragedy I'm seeing, but an eyewitness, and to deliver that. And sometimes it's very hard to be professional and to be ignorant in some ways to see to things you are seeing in the field. But unfortunately, that's the only way, the way to survive, and the only way to tell a story and to deliver it to the audience. So when I'm standing behind the camera, I'm trying to focus all these emotions which are concerning me into the shots and transfer them to the audience, so they can start their own thinking and their own reflections on the stories we are producing.
Thank you, Anton. Thank you for your work and good luck. Yuri, as a Holocaust historian, I have a question for you, because I'm sure you already been asked this or similar questions about the Jewish theme in this war. We have a question here from the audience, basically a reflection of what you said on your saying Baruch Hashem, and the person find very difficult, just puzzled to believe, So the question is, how would you explain to American Jews the identity of Ukrainian Jews in today's circumstances? And there are many questions about the Holocaust distortions that are playing in this war, but I'm afraid we don't have enough time for that. So how would you explain the identity of Ukrainian Jews to American audience?
It's a question about identity, Ukrainian Jewish identity. Is it exist or doesn't exist? For me, it's a question still now, to be honest. What is this Ukrainian Jewish identity? It various lines of these identities, and what is the markers of this identity? Is it language, or is it political loyalty, or it's support of Ukraine, and so on? Regarding experience of Holocaust and genocide research, I must say that it's very popular to use term genocide. It's a very politicized term using in modern propaganda, Ukrainian propaganda as well. This war, for me, it's a question: how it's legitimate to use this word? For me, it's in propaganda. It's not. If we speak about academia, I even try to expel this word from our using. If we even write about any mass murders, I would try some new term and so on, because I would compare the situation in Ukraine now, what is going on, with what was happening in Balkans 1990s, and I would compare Putin with Milosevic, but with nuclear weapon. I would say this for me is this type. And he tried to change, Ukrainians, for Milosevic, for instance, Bosnians were not, it was like Serbs who traded Orthodoxy and converted to Islam and so on. So for Putin, it's Ukrainians, it's not good Russians who changed their identity, it became, let's say, changed their political orientation and so on. But for American Jews, what can I say?
Citizenship, don't you think?
Sorry?
It's a citizenship. It's where the home where you live.
No, it depends. But I almost didn't meet Jews who support, Putin in this case on this war. Even people who had didn't have any, I would say, strong political loyalty to Ukrainian state before February 24th. I think these people also changed their political position. I can say more when Zorek Zamoyski, this Jewish man from I forgot from what city, was killed on this war in Bucha.
Yeah.
He was killed. He was not Ukrainian nationalist. He was, let's say, ordinary guy who visited synagogue.
But that's a constitutive crime, and I think that's what, it's not a propaganda. It's a war crime. It's an ordinary person who was just killed on the street. I think we need to stop here. I'm sorry. we will dedicate a special event just to discuss this question because there's not enough time in a minute. Thank you so much. Thank you, Yuri. Thank you, Anton and Ostap. And I will turn to Elisa now.
Thank you so much again to all three of you, Yuri, Ostap, and Anton, for sharing your words with us today. It was really powerful. And thank you to everyone who chose to listen and who will choose to listen to these words, which I think are first and foremost words of resistance. So thank you again, and goodbye, everyone.